Now, to start us off, our first speaker. I'll give a little preamble. Our first speaker started out in my industry of broadcasting, initially on the political beat for TV AM and GMTV, and then the BBC. I'm waiting for a nice little background music. There we go. Yeah, let's just give him some energy. And where he crossed over to corporate affairs. I love the music, it's just right for this man. His lordship then moved on to KPMG and then was made a life peer in 2005. He is now Professor of Leadership at the Huntsman Business Schools. He's Chair of Trustees at the School of Oriental and African Studies and Chair of the London Chamber of Commerce Black Business Association. Before we meet Lord Hastings of Scarisbrick in person, let's have a look at some of his finest bits. Ron VT.
Most of you are here today because you're probably thinking about how do you make and create big, strong, successful businesses? How do you become the engines of the future? How do you maybe possibly become the man or woman who makes Uber or Airbnb or whatever it happens to be, the next founder of Microsoft 2020? That could be your dream. But if that's the limits of your dream, what kind of world will you have created? It's far too easy to have ignorance trump intelligence when you're driven by self-deceit and just pure promotion. So yes, aim to be extremely successful. Learn the best tools and techniques in the course of the day. Have your heart focused on these objectives.
Lord Hastings, please take the stage.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're in buzzy mood. Yes? Optimistic? Good. So exactly 100 years ago, my video, I need a little slide clip. Saying next, oh, look at that. Oh no, that's it, good. Exactly nearly 100 years ago, a cartoonist produced this remarkable expression. Just study it for a second. Little US, little England, little France. Big China, big India, big Africa. Scary, said someone. Is it a myth? Or is it possible? And if it's possible, what are the implications of it for you, for me, and the way we think about business? Now, when this came to light, around about 2 months ago, within a week of this particular wonderful graphic re-emerging online, the World Economic Forum published some interesting data. It showed the transfer of economic value between the G7 countries, which were meeting in Japan, and the non-G7 leadership countries, which include both India and China and South Africa and Brazil, which were meeting elsewhere. The G7 countries at that point in May represented 30.5% of global GDP. The non-G7 countries represented in May 32.7% of global GDP. The change is happening. And it has profound and interesting implications. This emerged on Monday. This is a 2025 Goldman Sachs projection of world economic value. Now, I'm going to help you a little bit with it because some of you probably are noting by age have got bad eyes, as I do. And you might be struggling to see it. But it helped me to focus on this yesterday. I returned from Kenya yesterday morning and launched this book at SOAS last night, Jewel of Africa, Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa, Blueprint for Taking Nigeria and Africa from Potential to Prosperity. Contained within here are some of the key principles I'm going to mention in light and then discuss with today's author. So look at that list. Let me help you. Within the top 20 of these countries, there are 3 African countries listed. Nigeria at number 5, Egypt at number 7. Remember, Egypt is in Africa. Got to remind people about that. So is Morocco and Libya and Algeria. Remember that? There are many sides to Africa, all right? Nigeria at number 5, Egypt at number 7, Ethiopia at number 17. Add up the collective GDP of the 3 African countries in 2075, it comes out at $29.7 trillion. Add up the 3 European countries within the same 20, Germany at 8.1 trillion, the UK at 7.6 trillion, and France at 6.5 trillion, and it comes out at 23.1 trillion. A shift is coming. A big, critical shift of change. Add Italy into the mix. Of course, you can't leave out the Italians. They have to be everywhere. They need that coffee. You add Italy into the mix, you're adding an extra 3.8 trillion, takes you to 26 trillion. Even if you add the 4 European countries who are within the total 30, they don't outpace the 3 African countries in the top 20. Now, the issue for you and me is whether or not we have sufficient optimism to believe that this is a viable reality. And if it is a viable reality, why is it important? Because fundamental to the lessons contained in Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa is the necessity, as the author says, I met him last night and had a good review of the text and a discussion with him. He sets out what he calls these critical enablers for the future. The first one being the optimism of a non-corrupted, strong and stable macroeconomic environment. Did you get it? Optimism and no corruption combined together produces a stable macroeconomic environment in which business can thrive. That is a challenge to every country on the continent of Africa, every country in the Caribbean, and every black business person who wants to make it. Shall we be honest about that? That's so important. Secondly, he goes on to talk about securing lives free of poverty and empowered through property. In other words, the acquisition of valuable assets as compared to just the showism of party time. Oh my word. When the latest figures came out this year, that the average wedding of a white person in the UK cost £17,500, the average, and the average black wedding cost £33,000, now you know why black people don't own houses. Until we learn how to value assets as more important than glitter, we will not progress. He goes on to talk about a national values system, a critically embedded set of virtues and values that drive the macroeconomic environment. Now, another book came out this year, and then I'm going to come on to today's book. Henry Kissinger turned 100. Some of you remember Henry Kissinger, the old people do. Hands up, all the old people. Oh, no, that's all right. That's everybody. That's everybody. Henry Kissinger turned 100 just a month ago. He produced a book on leadership, 6 studies in world strategy. It's definitely worth a read, so I read the reviews, and contained... although I did meet him twice. Contained in the book, he sets out leadership principles from 6 key individuals, including, for example, Anwar Sadat, of course, who led Egypt and brought about a peace engagement with Israel. But the key one that he focuses on more than anyone else is Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew was the founding prime minister of the powerful, as he says, city-state of Singapore, which is the beacon of excellence. So what are we meant to learn from the beacon of excellence with its population of 5 million, its absence of natural assets, not a single river, not a single mine, no gold, no diamonds, no jewels, no metals? What are we to learn from that about the potency of character to ensure that the opportunity of the future, and I'm just going to flick back to this, allows this reality to become possible? But I'm going to pull up my very dear son, Kenny Imafidon, and ask him to come up on stage. Because today, his book is published by Penguin. When people want to get a book published, they scratch around wondering if somebody will be interested in them, like, could Spar supermarkets possibly take me on? But he went for the top. Penguin published today that Peckham Boy. Here it is. It's out in full. There's a quote on the back from Giggs, who says, "A clean-hearted guy, even through the bullshit." Well, And there's a quote on the front from me which says, "A manifesto of possibilities." I know you want to get your copy, but the reason I wanted to interview Kenny, I'll let you hold that so they can all see it as well. I wanted to interview Kenny for a minute is he has embodied and does embody what this potential represents in practice. Because this dear man, who I call my son, who I love desperately, this dear man was imprisoned falsely 10 years ago. So what happened?
I thought you were going to do that for me.
No, you go on.
That's fine. Yeah, no, thank you, everyone. So just to cut a very long story short, so 2 days after turning 18, back in 2011, I was arrested and charged for a murder that took place in Peckham. And so literally, as you can imagine, that just made my whole world turn upside down at that moment. So four others of my friends were arrested and charged beforehand, but I never thought I would get caught up in this. And so I found myself in Felton Prison. In the middle of my second year of doing A-levels, I was studying philosophy, politics, and history at the time. I dropped economics because that's a bit too hard. But essentially, I studied those subjects. I thought I'm going to go to uni, going to go and study PPE, and for me, that was just kind of like my future. But I guess, long story short, in terms of I did 6 months in Felton Prison. I was acquitted halfway at trial at the Old Bailey. 2 of my close friends, one got found guilty, got 30 years to life, the other got 26 years to life. And both of them are still appealing their innocence till today. So it's been about 13 years now. So I'm 30 now, that happened when I was 18. And so you have to imagine in terms of, I guess just how life has changed a lot since then. So in the book, I'm very much talking about this moment that happened, but also just making it very clear, look, I'm not defined by that moment either, right? And for me, I think too much... Yeah, and I just say often too much people are just too, I guess we get too consumed and become prisoners of our past, right? And in terms of we always, and me and Dad always talk about all the time, just very important for everyone to acknowledge that, look, you are much more than the worst thing that's happened to you and much more than the worst thing you've done. And it's very important to just always remember that. And I think so, yeah. But to be honest, the book has been a labor of love. I started writing in late 2017. And obviously Dad's seen me write it everywhere, in New Zealand, on road trips everywhere. And anyone who's wrote a book and has got it published knows it's a brutal process. And so many times I wanted to quit, right? Because you do draft after draft. It makes uni light work when you're doing a book. So, but yeah, so to be honest, look, I'm just very grateful just for the book to be out today. I really do hope that it blesses people. And not just the story in terms of my own, but just the story of others in terms of just seeing how society plays a big part. Because one of the key things for me in this book, and which I want to make clear to everyone today, is that my success and all I've gone on to achieve is very much because of mentors in my life, God in particular, and at the same time just having that support network of people that have really helped to elevate me, standing on the shoulders of giants. And just for me, it's just so important. And I think in life, when you're succeeding and when you're doing things, it can be very easy when people see your name on the front of something that is just a one-man's job. And to be honest, I'm standing on the shoulders of my mum, Dad here, so much people who've invested their time, money, opened up doors for me, giving opportunities that I shouldn't have had, right? And so I think it's just important that everyone understands the importance of genuine mentorship and investing in people. And that's why I love the title, Growing Up, Getting Out and Giving Back, because the giving back bit is a lot where our community falls short on.
Now, on your giving out bit, just to give a bit of context, because I know all the ways you do give back, but one of the big ways you give back is you've taken on huge charitable causes. So the chairman of City Gateway in East London, which of course provides education, training, development for some of the most impoverished, particularly Bangladeshi women and people from minority communities. You've taken that into a huge growth area since you became a trustee 4 years ago. You're the youngest trustee of BBC Children in Need, which means that you're responsible for gifting away around £100 million of value every single year. And of course, you and I work together in prisons in which we support people who are incarcerated and ensure that we help them to develop meaningful lives into the future. So an active giver, but also a highly effective businessman. So somebody who's been incarcerated, gone to prison, got technically a semi kind of notation as a criminal record, because when you came out of prison, you Googled your name and then the list of all your crimes and possible crimes all came up. You know how Boris Johnson feels. Anyway, so but you went on to create a very successful multi-million-pound business, which you're the managing director of. And just give everybody a sense of how do you become such a successful businessman at the same time? And what is it you do?
What do I do? Yes, I run a company called Clearview Research. So we basically do social research and market research. We're very much interested in what people think and also what people really believe that they don't want to tell you. So we're just very curious people. And so essentially we started it about 8 years ago, founded it with 2 other people. And yeah, so we've just grown from, as Dad said, from just starting with a couple £100 that I had at the end of uni. And yeah, so we've grown into making millions and doing stuff. And I think for me, the important thing when I think about business and the life that I lived before, and in this book, it very much talks about a double life, like growing up, really hustling and showing people that, look, for me, it's very important that we understand that, generally speaking, you can be whoever you want to be, right? And I think a lot of times we're looking for role models, but I think for me, the real accountability is like, if you can't see it, that doesn't mean you can't be, you just need to be that person for other people. And that's what I really try to do in business and show people, wherever you come from, Peckham, wherever you come. I'm Peckham pre-gentrification, by the way. I know when you say it now, it can sound... but yeah, so that's the answer to the question.
Actually reminded Kenny that before he was even born, we lived in Peckham when the time when nobody wanted even to pass through on a bus. It was a lot worse than that. But just some of the clients, so obviously I'm chairman of SARS. His business has helped me and my university to understand some of the issues that we've had with our students and our faculty. But you've also done a huge amount of work. Just talk about the work you did, for example, with Vodafone, which was 2 years ago, which is all about the prospects of Africa.
Yeah, so must be like 2 years ago, so we did a project looking at, in terms of diversity and philanthropy and looking at from a racial lens. And so we done that project with Vodafone Foundation, Safaricom and others. So we did the work in Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya and South Africa. Essentially looking at, basically myself and another academic called Becky. And so it was a very brilliant project, just looking in terms of, I guess our whole thing was, why is that so much money comes from the global, is it North? And in terms of when it's coming to the global south, that it has to go through essentially white hands before it gets there. And anyone who understands in terms of the flow of capital and philanthropy should be amazed that when you look at directly how much money comes, you're talking about a very small percentage. You're talking about less than 5% that goes directly from these big institutions to African-based organizations on the ground in terms. So when you think about it in that way, right, why do we need so much middlemen? And what all these middlemen doing, particularly in a context where a lot of them don't understand the work and don't understand what success looks like. That's a problem also with data and measurement, right? Where it's like, by whose standards? And so yeah, a lot of times, that's why I kind of love this photo, because to be honest, a lot of time people do have to just be owners of their own destiny, right? That's the truth. But so I would say that anyway, right?
So the very last question I'll just put to you, which you and I both know the answer, but I just want the whole of the audience to know the answer as to how you express it, is at the core of your success, at the heart of the book, and what you believe makes viable business, exactly what this other author says for the continent, what is possible here, is having an embedded sense of values. And what are those key values that drive you, that allow you to be a man of such integrity and peace when you used to be a roadman?
That's a good one. Listen, roadmen have values too. I think for me, look, I guess one of the things there are two things I really believe. One is very much just the importance of living a life of no excuses. And for me, that's something which I very much have carried throughout my life, just making sure that I don't give an excuse for anything. And I know like a lot of times, I know there are real forces that exist, real challenges, real difficulties, but at the same time, just being very clear that I'm not going to accept any of that as an excuse. A lot of people, we love to blame everyone. We blame the government, we blame society, we blame our dad, our mum, this, that. And for me, it's like some people blame the weather. There's always a reason, and someone else to blame. And for me, I think learning accountability, for me, has just been very fundamental. And I would say, secondly, as well, just the importance of self-awareness, right? And I think for me, particularly as a leader, that's the number one skill you must have is self-awareness, and just to be able to just have people around you as well, and understand the importance of teamwork. And I think for me, it's understanding that, look, dreams happen in collectives. It's never just a one-person thing. But yeah, we have to be resilient. And I'm not just saying that because, oh yeah, you're black, work twice as hard. You just have to learn to be resilient, full stop, regardless of your background, your context. And for me, that's what I would say has been very important. I've just kept being on it, as you said, even with the clients and the partners. Yeah, lifelong learning, right? You never stop learning. I think a lot of people, the problem is, particularly with books, the last time they really read a book is uni. That's the problem. And some people have left uni a long time ago. So, yeah.
So let me wrap us up. So we're bang on time, because we're meant to be out. Yeah, I know, we're bang on time. Look at that. See, I used to do live broadcasting as well. It was proper real television, you know. None of this noncy radio stuff. And but here is the quote I want you to hold on to that has been embedded into Kenny's life that makes this viable and possible. And then when you look at the facts of what's coming, can convince you to have the optimism to believe. This is John F. Kennedy, who of course was assassinated with his dreams and never got to see the one thing he said, America putting a man on the moon within his lifetime. Well, it didn't happen, but when he made the announcement in 1963, he said that this is the hardest thing that anyone in science will ever seek to do. He said, we don't know how we're going to achieve it, but because it's hard, we must progress with it and get it done. So he said this: the problems of the world cannot be possibly solved by skeptics and cynics whose horizons are limited by obvious realities. We need people who dream of things that never were. Thank you for having us.